Our journey to this off-grid life has been a long one. 18 years ago, my husband Fraser bought a field in South Lincolnshire. It was completely empty. No trees or buildings, just mud. In the first few years, he planted over 3,000 trees, laid a track, and started using the land as a yard for his tree surgery business. When I met him 11 years ago, there wasn't a single tree that was above head height. A lot can change in 11 years. We are now married, have 2 children, and live in the woodland that Fraser planted. Filmed on the week of his 40th birthday, this video is a reflection on the things we've built and the changes we've made in order to become an off-grid family.
So things we've done since we've been here. So starting with the first thing was sighting our static caravan, and the day we were expecting the caravan, it didn't turn up. Got a phone call saying there was some problems, and it was a frosty day and we could have probably moved it across the land better. And then it turned up the next day, which was a really wet day, and I should have prepared the ground. I should have spent about £2 on preparing the ground to actually get it to where it's meant to be, or thought about it a bit harder, but I thought, I see these things on fields and whatnot, and it'll be alright. It got stuck almost straight away, right up to the axle. We were digging it out, and we had a good friend that came over and put his truck and his digger at risk of damage trying to get it out. We had our truck tied to his truck tied to a digger, the digger tied to the static, and it wouldn't move until we actually dug it basically right out. And eventually it got into position where we took the wheels off it, blocked it up underneath, and it's been there since. The next thing we had to do was the septic tank and sewerage. We installed the soil pipes, we run it down ever so slightly with not too much fall, and it just had to be enough such that it sort of floats along into the septic tank. After that it was water and water filtration, but we had a borehole put down before we got down here, and we never realised that it was salt until we started drawing from it. And we started drawing from it when we started making our little outhouse, our pump house let's call it, that looks like a log store. And it's got all the pumping stuff, and we also put our generator in it. It was just to hide it, because if we were at work we were always worried that someone was going to come and steal it, and it's basically bolted down in there and out the way so people think it's a log store. So on from there we then had to start collecting and filtering the rainwater. I had some filters from America that were called spin down filters that I didn't really need for rainwater, because the spin down filters were heavy sediment that might have come out of the ground, and in the end I took them out and I just went with I think they call them poly filters, basically like woven filters, and a ceramic filter and a carbon filter, which we were going to use alongside those anyway. We've now got a UV light in, but we didn't at the time. So we had fresh water, but then we didn't have a means to collect enough of it at the time, so we had to build and mess around and spend more money on tanks. And at the time we bought IBC tanks. There's good IBC tanks and there's bad IBC tanks. There's cheaper ones and there's good ones, as I found out. We got some that weren't that good, and we put them up basically on some staging, because we've got this big borehole pump now that we couldn't put in a borehole. So we use that in a tank, but it only takes the water from sort of halfway up the IBC tank. So the other 3 tanks that we had, we put on a platform. So I built a platform so that you could turn the water on and run it down into a lower IBC tank with our pump in it. And that worked for years and years, getting around to replacing them now, but that's what we ended up doing to get by a problem at the time. So the next thing we did was we started building a barn. We decided that we were going to spend the money and put it in green oak, and it was quite daunting actually, because when it turns up, just how long and heavy 4 meters of green oak is, and trying to move it with a tiny tractor, and we managed it. So I was going to purchase the wind braces already made, but they were about £60 each, and it was getting very expensive. We needed more than 22 at the time, I think it was, and if I made a mistake it was just quite a lot of money to lose. So we ended up getting a bandsaw. We cut them all, shaped them up, and just made our own basically, and then it was all driven together with dried oak pegs, and there's definitely been some movement in the oak, which should just be expected. It's always going to move with green oak. There's the odd twist and crack, and at first when it all started doing that I started to panic, and I thought, well, I need to have a look in the books and see if other people's have done that. and quite reassuringly that is just the way it goes. It's a barn, you know, it's not for the house. It's going to weather, and that's just part of it. But it's getting your head around that when you try so hard to get it so precise and it's all clean and well put together, and then things start to twist and move. You just got to live with it with green oak, I'm afraid. I think when we were looking at the pitch of the roof, I was reading all sorts of things about you need this pitch for winter and you need this pitch for summer, and obviously in summer you get loads of solar, and in winter you don't get as much sun, so you should probably go with a winter pitch. And then you read a bit more and you go, well, yeah, winter pitch is good if you actually have a sunny winter, because they do say that you do get more bounce off the cloud on a sort of a summer pitch. So I just went smack bang between those two pitches. I can't remember what they were now, the winter one and the summer one for this area, but I just went, we'll just do it in between those pitches and we'll be done with it. That'll do. So the barn actually was probably the better project we've actually done down here. It was the most enjoyable thing we've probably done. We didn't have children at the time, and you had a bit more time to spend on it and think about it, and it was actually really enjoyable working with oak. The next thing we moved on to was our solar power system. That was a bit more stressful, trying to find out information. There wasn't a lot at the time. 2 years on, there's lots of information. No one seemed to have Pylon Tech and Victron things together that were online to find. You couldn't find anything to try and copy from. You know, this is why I was end up looking at kits and things like that that people had and trying to get some sort of an idea. And eventually, through lots of research, we decided to make up our own kit because it wasn't all the things that we wanted. It was just, some of it was a bit of a shot in the dark because we couldn't actually get some of the things we wanted at the time. This was during COVID and things were taking ages and ages to arrive. Some things you just couldn't get. There was combiner boxes that just weren't what we needed for our system. And so we ended up making do. You've got to be fairly resourceful if you're going to be off-grid, because you can't always have it all. Sometimes it's a case of making do until you can make it right. Yeah, so when you finally switch on the lights and you haven't got to run a generator to do it, or you know, have a fridge that you haven't got to have a cool box to be able to just turn the tap on and get water out, it does really make you respect where things come from. And think, oh, you remember when we used to do that, have to go out to the generator, it was a frozen morning, and start it up in the cold and things like this to get lights. You couldn't just get up and turn a light on in the night. But we kind of weathered it, and now we're really quite spoilt. So we started the Polytunnel in December 21 and we finished putting the beds in February. That was a bit of a pain to put up, I must admit. Trying to find the best way of putting that up. The weather wasn't good. The people that sell it do say that you can put it up at such a temperature. You need a really warm day to do it. You find out how slack they go when you get a really hot day. It'll be really tight, and then, my god. And also it depends on the polythene you've got. This is a really thick polythene I think we've got. When I was trying to put it in the pleats, it was a nightmare to do. It was a nightmare to get in the rails. It was probably one of the worst projects I've done down here, one of the most frustrating projects. I kind of had to let it go because with the polythene, after about 7 years, it gets replaced. I might go for another polythene, but one thing I certainly will do is put it up on one of the hottest days of the year. So future projects, well, we're going to have to build a gasifier because trying to get through the winter with the prices of fuel is not good, and we don't really want to go down the route of spending loads of money on more solar panels and a wind turbine. I just don't feel it's actually worth the money. Chicken coop is another thing we're going to try and build. A distant future project will be build the house down here. We haven't decided on what we're going to do. I still want to go back to using oak. So we've got lots of future projects coming up. They don't always go well, but if you'd like to see more, consider subscribing. And if you'd like to see our water filtration system, check out the video here.